from some sectors of the Republican Party. The vice president is actually being seen publicly a lot more now, the former vice president, than he was when he was in office. And, of course, he said in his speech that those who criticize enhanced interrogation are practicing recklessness cloaked in righteousness.
Yeah, I really yearn for the day when I don't have to turn on my television and see Dick Cheney talking. It's been 8 years of that, and I can't believe that it's still moving forward. And of course, you know, he's doing the same thing that the Republican machine has done ever since September 11th. Is every time that there are policy discussions on the table, every time that they begin to lose the fight about what is legal and what is proper, they roll out the fear carpet, which of course he's doing again. And not only has he, you know, I fear, spooked this administration a little bit, but he's also spooked the Congress. It's outrageous that the Congress is playing this entire piece on the Republican battlefield. The president said, you know, let's focus on some of the good things. President Obama said that he was going to close Guantanamo in a year, and he should be applauded for that. But of course, Congress is messing with that timeline fairly severely by not providing the funding for him to do that, and by saying no one will be able to release to American soil, whether they're they come as prisoners or detainees, or they come as free people, which of course holds up the timeline for any types of trials that the administration wants to do. It doesn't allow groups like the Uyghurs, the Chinese Muslims, who everybody says pose no threat to anyone, to possibly be resettled in the United States, which they absolutely should. And when that doesn't happen, it keeps the doors to Europe locked. So the question is, with the Congress taking this stance, how is the administration going to close Guantanamo and send people who can be released back to where they came from, or to third countries, or to try the people that can't be released?
Vince Warren, I want to go to that issue of the Uyghurs for people to understand what you're talking about. A judge says they should be released immediately. The Chinese government doesn't allow them back into China. So where are they? And explain why this is such a good example of the argument of people being allowed into the United States.
Yeah, the Uyghurs are a very, very interesting group, and we should start out by saying that there used to be more Uyghurs in Guantanamo than there are now. There were a group of Uyghurs that were released several years ago and are now living in Albania in a camp there, posing no threat to anyone. The remainder of the group are still in Guantanamo, but of course the factual circumstances of the people in Guantanamo are the same factual circumstances of the people that were released to Albania. And of course it's just a hallmark of the Bush era that they would release some people but not release others. So now we have court cases in which we've gotten orders that the Uyghurs should be released or can be released, and first the Bush administration, and now it appears the Obama administration, in terms of their legal position, has been opposing that. So we're in a situation where the Uyghurs fall into, I believe it was the third category of detainees that President Obama talked about, when these are people that have been ordered released by courts. But right now, what makes it difficult is that China doesn't want them back, and then no other country wants to take them because they fear getting into a tangle with China. So this is a completely politicized situation that has fallen on the backs of innocent men who've been in Guantanamo for years, and no one, especially not Congress, is stepping up to do anything about it. What we need to do is to release the Uyghurs into a Uyghur community into the United States. That will then unlock the door to Europe to take a whole range of other people that should be released, some that have been released, and some that have been cleared for release by the Bush administration that are sitting in Guantanamo right now.
President Obama's opposition to an independent commission.
That was an interesting discussion, because our view at the Center for Constitutional Rights is that the purest form of accountability is criminal prosecution. We don't oppose a commission at the Center for Constitutional Rights, one in which there's subpoena power, in which criminal charges can come and there's no amnesty. But what I found interesting is that President Obama opposed blue ribbon commissions like the 9/11 commissions, but at least in his discussion seemed to leave open the possibility of criminal prosecution by saying that the existing part of the democracy, the Justice Department, has the full ability to investigate folks. So I found it a little bit interesting. I think that there's room there for a criminal investigation, and I certainly think that accountability and transparency go hand in hand. And to the extent that this administration is agreeing to release documents and release information as a subject of our lawsuit and the ACLU lawsuit, and to the extent that those documents show criminal activity, it behooves this government to start criminal investigations of the very information that they're releasing to the public. You can't just put it out there and pretend it doesn't exist.
Vince Warren, I want to play one more part of former Vice President Dick Cheney's speech yesterday and then get your response.
Over on the left wing of the president's party, there appears to be little curiosity in finding out what was learned from the terrorist. The kind of answers they're after would be heard before a so-called Truth Commission. Some are even demanding that those who recommended and approved the interrogations be prosecuted, in effect treating political disagreements as a punishable offense and political opponents as criminals. It's hard to imagine a worse precedent filled with more possibilities for trouble and abuse than to have an incoming administration criminalize the policy decisions of its predecessor.
Vince Warren, your reaction to former Vice President Dick Cheney calling this an issue of political disagreements?
That is a tremendous amount of nonsense. This is not a political disagreement. What has happened here, this is arguably some of the worst and notorious criminal activity committed by government officials in the history of the United States. So what we really need to be focusing on is once the criminal activity is exposed, what is this administration going to do about it? This is not about partisan wrangling in the Beltway. This is not about respectful policy disagreements. This is about torture. This is about illegal activity that was engaged in by members of the administration and military operatives and CIA operatives under the Bush administration. And it is absolutely beholden on this administration, and in fact required under Article 4 of the Geneva Conventions, once this information is out there specifically around torture, to begin an investigation. It's not a question of if, it really is a question of when he's going to do it.
And on a related note, what's your reaction to the report that came to light this week, the Pentagon report, that 1 in 7 former detainees at Gitmo who were released have gone back to terrorist activities?
Yeah, every couple of months, the Department of Defense rolls out these statistics of who's gone back to the battlefield. I have a couple of comments on that. Number one, they've never been specific, for the most part, about who these detainees are. Number two, when you look at the going back to the battlefield rhetoric, they talk about a range of things. They talk about people who may have taken arms up against the U.S., but they also talk about people that support people that take arms up against the U.S. So theoretically, you can be one of those people on the Department of Defense list if you are consorting with people who have expressed that they want to take up arms against the United States. And so it's the devil is in the details in these numbers. And I think the important piece is this. They are way overinflated. We've never gotten any details of this. Interestingly enough, this document has been the subject of a Freedom of Information Act suit for a very long time, and we still haven't gotten it. But they like to roll out those numbers. And I think finally, the thing that's important is I am convinced that the specter, the fact of Guantanamo, generates more dangerous people than the number of people that have ever been released. For every one person that may go back to the battlefield or may harbor ill will towards the United States, the people that are beginning to do that for every day that people are held in Guantanamo far outweigh that. And so the issue really isn't about who's going back to the battlefield. The issue is who are we going to prevent from going to the battlefield in the first place by doing the right thing in the United States.
Vince Warren, I want to thank you very much for being with us, Executive Director of the Center for Constitutional Rights. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. When we come back, a discussion about the climate change bill that's going through Congress. Stay with us.